thank you for stopping by because you're about to see another live stream at Landon Huber Studios. I'm Landon Huber, and a quick recap. So, over the past several live streams, you've seen me draw and ink these pictures. This was the first one, the period. He's a superhero based on a punctuation mark. This is the apostrophe, another superhero based on a punctuation mark. And these guys who are the hench things. And so if you go check out the previous 7 live streams now I've done so far, what we're going to be doing, you'll see me developing those pieces. So what I'm going to be doing now is inking this guy. This guy is Runon Sentaunce, the Evil Frenchman from my awesome indie comic book, The Punctuation Men. So yeah, check it out. Okay. Still kind of getting set up here. Now we're going to start inking pretty soon. I better not whistle too much. I might set off a YouTube alarm. Okay. So yeah. This is Runon Sentaunce, the evil arch nemesis of the Punctuation Men. Okay. So yeah, I will be talking today, but I'm just gathering my thoughts, I guess. Right now, with this piece, what I want to try to do is kiss it. So well, what I mean is what my high school art teacher used to say, which is keep it simple, stupid. I'm going to try to do that. At least with the inking. I mean, it's not a super simple, I guess, piece. It's not, but there isn't that much, like, I don't want this whole thing to be like kind of cross-hatched and stuff, So I'm gonna try to simplify it into like shapes and simplify the shapes. Or maybe I'm just overthinking it too much. Although I think I heard Frank Miller one time say in an interview or a press junket of some kind, if you think you're overthinking it, you're not. Frank Miller's really good at distilling things down to like these. He does it in his art too, but he distills like philosophically down to like a core idea, and just makes it really. Like I saw one he said about spinner racks. He said if you don't have a spinner rack, get one. Well, unfortunately, I don't have a spinner rack, but I should get one. It's more about the nostalgia, and the how comics were sold, and obviously a lot of things can be done online now, but you know that the vibe of the spinner rack, it's just kind of a thing. I'm feeling already that my hand is kind of tight feeling, and I'm not sure I'm vibing with this brush at the moment to sort of get broken in here. But where is the cap of it? All right. I'll just keep going with it for a little bit here. Yeah, so I guess I'll start out then while I'm getting in here. I'll kind of just do a bit of a overview of who I am, what I do. So my name is Landon Huber, and I create uh, different things. I create uh, comic books. My own IP called the Punctuation Men, which is what I'm doing right here. Then um, also I'm an illustrator, so I am open for commissions. You can find my work online. My website, Instagram is really where you can probably see like the most range of all the different stuff I do. But I do have a website. It's landonhuberstudios.com, and I primarily sell Halloween art shirts there. And but it's also just my illustrator website. So if you need to contact me, you can go there and find out all the information you need. Um, so I also do fan art pieces, you can say, although I consider the word fan art to be a little bit dismissive. Um, I mean, yes, I guess it's just a way to identify it wasn't officially commissioned or hired by whoever the company is, Marvel, DC, that created the characters. But I don't think the fact that it's quote unquote fan art makes it any less, viable than something that isn't. Only maybe technically on paper, but like spiritually, philosophically, it's what it comes down to is just, did it capture the essence of the character, you know? And that opens it up to really anybody, can do it. Like, there's a legal like realm obviously to it, but if you can draw or paint or create like a really cool image of Spider-Man, and maybe even, let's say a lot of people thought it was actually better than like stuff that's coming from Marvel, does that make it fan art? You know what I mean? So anyway, I guess it's just a word, but um so I do that. I make fan art. Um I also make surreal art and music, and I've also direct and written produced a film. So that's why I call myself a filmmaker too. Now, obviously, I'm not doing all of these things all the time simultaneously, because I think that's even if obviously you can't, but if you try to, you'd either die or never get anything done. Um, so whatever I'm in, these are all just various aspects of my creativity. Filmmaking is the thing that I don't do as consistently, but what I've been doing recently mostly is working on these Punctuation Men things and trying to get issue 2 all ready to come out, and finalizing issue 1, which is going to be the restored edition, which is going to be coming out through Ingram Spark, making it available to anybody that wants to get it. Now, I did, when that becomes available, it is a nice, you know, thing. I went on higher quality paper, and I, really fine-tuned the whole thing so that it would be a high quality product that you get. So it has a $8.49 price tag, which is actually pretty reasonable considering what you're getting, but also considering just the fact that it's an indie comic and it's print on demand. So, you know, obviously, I guess you don't need me to explain it, but these companies that are ordering thousands of whatever it is can sell you the product for much cheaper, and that's why they that's how they actually beat out their competition. That's like the Walmart way. um you know Not that that's breaking news, but when you're a small time indie creator, you just don't, you can't do that. So I'm currently a small time indie creator here. But if you don't want to get the bundles, because these are currently on sale, uh, as in bundles on eBay, which is, if you don't want to get like multiple copies right now, it's super cheap though. So you could get, you know, uh, a small amount, like 5, 10, and 15 is the smallest bundles I offer. And then if you want more, then the pricing even gets better. But that would be more for like resellers and things of that nature. But yeah, it's a really cool comic, and you should check it out. You can check it out online. I've been making a lot of these videos. Um, the problem I'm kind of starting to run into now, even just after 7 live streams, is I don't want to, give away everything. I don't want to spoil the whole book before it even comes out. I've already put out a lot of stuff on it, and you got to read it. You got to get a copy. And you might just. I'm still good. I think it's still live. Yeah. All right. Must have just been my computer. Yeah. I saw this like ad for this company that was like saying, "Hey, you want your comic book to." The problem with comics is that they're seeing just unmoving pictures, right? They're just still images. Well, pay our studio and we'll turn them into animated moving images. And I'm gonna guess that they're just using AI to do it. That's the thing. It's like when they created AI, it seems like they didn't think about like making, because basically people can still buy and sell and market virtually anything they want, you know, under, obviously, if it's not some kind of a harmful thing that has illegal restriction on it. Um but there hasn't seemed to be much legal restriction placed on, you know the use of AI. And I'm not gonna say, you know that I know where, because that's part of the problem. It's like, well, where do you put the legal restriction? If you were gonna do it, that would be like a hard thing to pass legal restrictions on the use of AI. But some people are doing it because I think there should be in certain, for certain things. Like, I don't think somebody should have the right to make like AI generated content and use your likeness and, to like, do anything they want with it. That should be restricted. Um, so so anyway, so I guess because of that, then there doesn't seem to be a lot or much like restriction on things like that. Like people trying to say, hey, pay us and we'll make your comic move, and then for this fee, we'll do this, we'll do that, blah blah blah. And it's all just BS for the most part. Um, comics, you can say it is an older medium, but at the same time, it's not that old. It's neither is film, for that matter. Like the medium of film, right? Well, I mean, it's only been around for what, a little over 100 years. But how long have like other things been around? How long have clocks or scissors or the list could go on. There's been some things that have been around for thousands of years. I went to China with my wife, and one of the things I noticed, because I live in Arizona, and there's nothing in Arizona. There's not a lot that's sort of old out here. Like this is the West, right? The new frontier. So um probably the oldest building you're gonna find over here might be like 100 years old. And that's probably about as old as it gets. Um, but they got buildings in China that have been there for thousands of years, and this rich cultural history. It's pretty amazing. So there's a school by where my wife lives called the 10,000-year-old school, and that's pretty cool. I went by there and walked back in 2019. I went again in a couple of years ago, like 2023, I think. But back in 2019, that was my first time going, and it was just beautiful. Like just seeing the architecture and the nature, the natural landscape, and everything. And I'm used to Arizona. I'm used to like desert and cactus. Okay, well, I guess we're making progress here, right? We're making some progress. It's getting done. It's getting done. It's not too shabby. Have you guys, if any of you that have been watching these, wouldn't mind just hitting that like, leave a comment, something like, hey, cool video, dude. Help get that algorithm to wake up on my channel so I can keep making videos, keep making better videos. There's this other guy, I won't name him, but there's a guy whose channel I was watching a bit, and I feel I have some similarities in the way that he thinks. Um, but he recently just decided not. First, he was like, "I'm done making videos," and then he came back and started doing live streams again. But like, he changed that, that he's not going to talk anymore, basically. And I kind of understand it because it's like, so when the artists like wanted to do this, like when they were at whatever point in time they decided they wanted to create like art or cartoons or whatever, I don't think they're like, oh, and I'm gonna have to do a running monologue also, because there's people who want to. There's the people who talk, right, and they do talk shows. They do so. Really, I do think that the format itself of YouTube is more set up for them. It's more set up for, things like podcasts and things like, um, like drawing pictures it's a silent medium, right? The old school, like comic book medium. The magic of it is kind of like about like you know, you didn't have somebody sort of sitting there explaining it to you. Like when I was younger and going to comic book stores or libraries and discovering all this cool stuff, uh, I didn't discover it in the same way that like kids discover stuff now, which is a lot of it is online. Um, because, live streaming didn't exist, YouTube didn't exist. And that was kind of magical in a way because you discovered this thing and then you didn't know what it was and you just opened up the book and it either grabbed you or you thought, oh, well, this is cool, you start, then, oh, I'm gonna read it, or uh you know and I must admit I was not a voracious reader. I did read, um but I had friends who were much more, readers than I, because I'm more of a visual thinker. Um, just the act for me personally, just the act of like reading long form things. I don't know. It wasn't, and I had like ADHD or something. So uh, I actually was diagnosed with OCD. So I have OCD. I was diagnosed when I was 15 years old. Um, I still have it. It never sort of just goes away completely, but it's not as bad as it used to be, where there was a lot of like weird things I was doing at around age 15, like um, washing my hands excessively, you know, opening and closing, stepping through a door multiple times, like, and that mostly all started after I had a diabetic, because I'm type 1 diabetes. So in ninth grade, I had an episode where I had a low blood sugar diabetic seizure in the middle of class. It was pretty bad, and even the paramedics had to come to the school and resuscitate me. And my mom says basically that after that moment is when my sort of symptoms, all these kind of weird behaviors kind of started. And I was aware of it, because anybody that has OCD, it's not like they're not aware of it, but they feel almost helpless to do these strange things, things like how I just mentioned. Like, if you ever watch the movie As Good as It Gets, it's not 100% realistic, but that's basically what that guy has. He has a form of OCD. Howard Hughes, So, um, anyway, that's kind of a little bit of truth about my life that I've never talked about publicly before, but there it is. I think a lot of people have things that, they don't really want everybody to know. But I guess I've just lived long enough that I just don't care much anymore. So, yeah, it is true. Like, when you're younger, that you tend to care more about what your friends think of you, and you're just very like work concerned, and there's all these like social like things that you're all worried about. But part of the reason for that is you haven't lived long enough for, that stuff seems important to you at the time. But, live longer and you will realize that that stuff is not as important as you think it is. Sometimes the thing that the teacher, the greatest teachers are some of the most difficult things that you go through in life, like experiencing loss and hardship of various kinds can teach you these things. You know, after people grow up, they all kind of go in their own direction in life. The sort of high school mentality of friendship isn't as prevalent when you're, 40, 50, 60 years old. So, but hey, That's life, right? Runon Sentaunce, the Evil Frenchman. Yeah, I'm excited. I'll be excited to show you guys Punctuation Men issue 2 for anybody, for the people, because there's been over the years about 1150 copies or so that have gotten out there, sold at conventions or sold in stores or given away or sold in comic book stores locally. So for anybody that's actually, for all the people that have actually gotten copies of the first issue, they're gonna hopefully love the second issue. I mean, a lot went into it. Although I have to say, one thing I've noticed, like, is that sometimes when you hear people promoting something and it's like they're saying to you so confidently, like it's better than the, like maybe you know them for something else that was really cool, and then they're saying like this one's the best thing I've ever done, da 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 da. That may be true, but sometimes, be wary of that, because sometimes people are their own uh, worst critics, I guess. I'm not going to name names, but there's a particular director who has done that, and it seemed to me that his best films were ones that just came out, and obviously he promoted them, but it wasn't like this one's going to be the best, better than the last one kind of thing. And those were actually the best ones, but then the ones where he was talking more like that, I felt weren't, were, maybe they had some cool elements, but as a whole, it wasn't as artistically, refined or whatever as the some of the previous films he had done. So I guess there's only one way to find out. And the way to find out is to watch it for yourself or experience it for yourself. There's only so much I can say here to try to convince you that you should check out the Punctuation Men. The Punctuation Man is kind of like the Matrix. Nobody can tell you what the Punctuation Man is. You have to see it for yourself. That was my Morpheus moment. My MM. So yeah, I don't know, going back to kind of what I was talking about, like because comics are the medium they are, you know. We don't necessarily need to make them moving, like then that's animation. That's a different medium, right? That's no longer a comic book. That's an animated cartoon, which those are cool too, but that I don't understand the concept of turning your comic book in, like making the images move. That's just every time I've seen that, it's just been kind of funky to me. The If you want it to be an animated cartoon, if you have, I mean, it's very difficult to, there's been people trying for years to make it their babies into animated cartoons. But let's be a little bit realistic for a second. Like those things are most of the time created by studios where they have, you know, either there has to be demand. There has to be whoever is like there's you just can't. I don't know. Maybe AI could change things, but you can't just like have an animated cartoon created by one guy. It's just like a phenomenal amount of labor that goes into that. Maybe you could create like one or two, but you know, these things, entertainment like that is created by entertainment studios. You know, what I'm doing here, this comic book, for the most part, it is a one-man operation. So, you know, uh, although the scripting for the first issue for this comic wasn't done by me, um, but the all the art and the and everything like that, and the creating the characters and the story and all that was, and so um, just that little detail of creating the art is, you know what I mean? Like some people tend to kind of browse over that. And I don't want to browse over the story either. I mean, if without a story, without a concept, you don't have anything. But if you want to talk about like the actual like labor intensive part, I can make an idea to build a house. I can have an idea to build a house, and but the building of the house is the thing that requires the most time and labor and stuff, right? So let's not browse over the creating the art part. Um, but otherwise, if the art isn't important and it's only the story that's important, then let's then go read a book that has no pictures, because that's a medium where you can. That's absolutely true, 100%. But comic books are a visual medium first. Otherwise, they wouldn't be what they are, right? They wouldn't be um like there wouldn't be all these pictures to look at, right? Although strangely enough, you do have to generally, I guess it's not a total rule of thumb, but generally speaking, it helps to start with like a script, or at least you have to know what the story is like before you start drawing something. Although I've heard stories about like Todd McFarlane throwing a bunch of random papers on the ground and then rearranging them and then figuring out the story that way, like, which is kind of funny. Um, that's not a diss on Todd. That's just something I've heard before, and like figuring out drawing the art first, and then we'll figure out a story. Like, that's funny. Um, but so I don't know, chicken or the egg. I'm starting to run low on ink. Let me squish this thing a little bit, get the ink flow to come back if I can. Get it to kind of squish out a little bit more ink. Ah, come on. What came first, the chicken or the egg? Um, that question may never be answered by a human being. Yeah, where I am with my music and stuff, I've not been in the last several months. Actually, I've not been recording music. I would say longer than that, actually. I did do a little bit of recording earlier last year after I got my new bedroom studio set up, but um, but recently I've been more just working on this stuff and developing ideas. Like, I've written a lot of songs, and my from you right now, from hearing me talk about it in this little video, are not gonna understand, but um I've been some of these songs are maybe the best things I've ever written, and they exist on my phone and on my email as ideas and things of me just plunking them out on the piano, and that's it. That's how they exist right now. uh and when I'm spiritually motivated to actually produce them as songs again, get back into the music production flow, you know, then I'll start releasing them. I'm probably going to change how I do it in the future. I don't know. I'll release full albums, you know. That's kind of the old school format anyway. Like I'll probably just release singles as they get done, and then promote those. Um, and these are all songs and music that I've written. So I'm gonna have to figure out a publishing situation with them. But yeah, it's some really good stuff. But you know, you won't understand it from me talking about it in this video. But if you do want to check out my music, you know, go ahead and check out the playlists on this channel. You know, that'll give you at least some kind of an idea of what I do musically. Has anybody else found it's, you know, I know there's all different levels of success and stuff, but maybe this is just me and where I'm at, but has anybody else found it's a little bit difficult to monetize creativity? Creativity is a beautiful thing. It feeds your soul, you know. It's the real reason you're here, you know. I don't think most people feel that their purpose in life is their 9 to 5, you know. But man, it is not like a walk in the park to try to monetize it. Really isn't. I mean, even like doing comic book shows has become an issue. Back in the day, when the economy was better and things were a little different. I don't know if you can hear my dog barking in the background, but that's my dog Bucky. But yeah, back in the day, basically, like getting a table at a comic show was not as crazy as it is now. Obviously, bigger show means bigger table costs, but if you're like a small time independent comic creator type of guy, think about it, like the table costs itself, let's say it's like $700. Then you got to think about the cost of all the products you're selling. So, you know, that's all the comics or prints or whatever it is. Then there's food, parking, and if it's a long distance show, that's you're gonna have to pay for a hotel also. So you start getting into the thousands of dollars of just the expense of doing the show. Now, if you look at it, I guess just as advertising, it's like I'm not gonna make a lot of money with this, but it is hard to it's like a hard pill to swallow because it's a lot of work to do all the stuff you got to do to attend a convention like that. And then um it's a cool experience to do it, but think about like just financially for a second. Like you literally have to clear in sales at the convention. Most of these you have to at least clear $1,000 or more, probably more like $1,500 just to pay your expenses. Okay. Then what are the, what are the, what are you selling? $10 comic books. You got maybe three. Usually it's only about 2 good days. People usually spend on Friday, Saturday. By Sunday, things kind of slow down. Then, yeah, so you only have sort of like 2 good days of sales, maybe three if you're lucky. People kind of browsing around, and they got all these different tables to look at of everybody else's stuff, all your competition, right? Or all the other people that are, selling their wares, to just say it simply. Um, you got to make so if you're selling a $10 comic book, even if you sold 100 of those things, you'd have to sell 100 copies of, like, cold sales at a con. That's kind of rare unless you're already like a well-known person, you know. But you're trying to build your career. That's a very, like, difficult to make that many sales at a convention. Um, I'm not saying it's impossible, but it's not probable, and it's not easy. And then even you sold 100 copies of your book, or whatever it is that's you're selling for, let's say, in the vicinity of $10. Um, then you still haven't cleared, all the cost of the books itself, right? So that's why, really, like, I think the people that can make money are like selling commissions. They're, you know doing sketches and all this other kind of stuff, because just selling comic books at a comic book convention is not easy, because you got to pitch it too. You got to pitch the idea, the concept. People walk by, what is that? Tell me. Okay, now I got to take at least, like, 5, 10, 15, whatever, however long to pitch it. And then at the, well, maybe I'll come back. Or maybe they like it and buy it. I don't know. But you know what I'm saying? So it's not impossible, but it's just, it is a risk. It's a financial risk, and you either have to be willing to take it or not. Um, you know. But, like, being a creator, you want people to be interested in what you're creating, right? And so you want to have that experience. I don't want to say it's all bad. You know, it's not. If it was all bad, people wouldn't go to conventions. Um, there's a lot of good about it, you know, like panels and people talking about, you know, you getting to find out about people's history and just being in a, because you know online it's kind of like a little bit watered down algorithmically or whatever, like because like the basically what I'm getting at is a convention is a concentrated form of exposure. That's the difference. Like you're yeah, you're kind of at the mercy of whoever's going to walk by your table kind of thing. Um but it's concentrated, like the, you know, you're betting on the people at the convention, like to 100 people, and maybe you get one bite or something, you know. A convention is just that, like on acid. A convention is just that, like on acid, I guess. It's like that's really where the highest concentration is. And it's also the difference is that people are kind of there. Some people aren't there to spend money, but a lot of people that are browsing the floor, they're looking for, you know, people know they should have a little bit of money on them to buy something cool, right? Um, whereas online, people aren't always. This is really fine. I'm having. I don't know if I'm making these lines as fine as I wanted there. A bit too much ink. Uh, well, the funny thing is, I started this saying "keep it simple, stupid," and I don't know that I'm successfully doing that, but I'll try to. I'll try to. It'll get there. You know. I will take this to the. I'll land the plane. I'll land the plane. Okay. It's turbulence. We're in a little bit of turbulence right now. So put on your gas masks. Suck in the oxygen. And hold on there with me. Another thing, I hope that it's noticed. Um, I don't know if it is, but I'm hoping that it's noticed that when I start these streams, for instance, this one, I have drawing streams and inking streams, but there wasn't a single line of ink on this paper when I started. So most of this has been done, all the inking process, not most of it, all of it has been done live in this stream from starting from just the pencils. Now, there's some very talented people out there who only sort of need a rough sort of pencils to get started from. Now, I don't work that way. And I don't even consider myself a speed demon when it comes to like, you know, just working in general. You know, I don't consider myself a speed demon. But you do see the progress like of this piece happening all right before your eyes. So I'm not. I hope it's noticed somewhat that it's not that it is all happening right here, and that I'm not sort of starting with a half finished like inked piece. And if you want to see the penciling process, maybe inevitably the watching the pencils might be a little bit more interesting because of the fact that you are starting with nothing, and it's being figured out, you know. The image is being literally figured out right before your very eyes. That's kind of interesting. Mm. If it's interesting to you, drop it in the comments. Let me know what you think. I'd love to get a few more comments on my videos here. I'm gonna make this stuff just chunky, you know. Sometimes you need the chunk. That's kind of what made Jack Kirby's, like, if you've ever like seen his Kirby crackle, they call it the Kirby crackle. It looks really cool. And if it was finer, smaller, it wouldn't have the same effect. It wouldn't have that same sort of bold, gnarly looking contrast effect, you know? So it is literally the fact that it's kind of as thick and big as they are. That's what's creating that bold contrast effect. Because the more you get stuck in like little lines, like what I'm doing here, actually, the less of the bold contrast effect that you will end up with. But this picture is funky, but like I said, I'll land the plane. I'll land the plane. There's going to be some areas as I squint that I'm going to go in, simplify that area, you know. Because I've already got quite a bit of like hatching detail going on here. All right, you see all this stuff up here? I'm going to ink that now. So I'm going to go my paper sideways and just start inking that stuff like a madman. Any of you guys like Mad Max, the movies Mad Max? They're pretty cool. I liked that first one. That's kind of the one that it's like that. I don't know the full history of it or anything, but it was kind of like a low budget indie film, you know. That's why the sound is kind of like 80 or like dubbed in later kind of thing. But it's kind of cool, like, because it has that. It's like the Sergio Leone movies, you know. To me, it added an extra. It's almost like adding an extra effect to the movie, even though it was done like out of necessity because they couldn't, you know, they couldn't afford like a sound camera or whatever the issue was. Which is probably that, especially if it's lower budget. Because having to worry about sound and then stuff like that is like a whole nother issue on a film, especially when you're just trying to get shots. Um, my film Erratic was actually done like that. All the sound was dubbed in after the fact. but I really did the best job I could to sync it up so it wasn't distracting, you know. But that was like an extra layer of complication that I had to deal with. And it creates more excess time in post-production, you know. I think most people would tell you that have made independent films that they basically just doing things independently. If you want a good quality, it's gonna take longer than if you're like than if it's kind of produced in some kind of a studio system. Just like across the board, whether it's film, comics. Um, Monthly comics are produced by teams, you know. So with any like given comic, there's at least like 6 or 7 people, probably, or you know, possibly more, that have had their hands on that thing, you know. You could have a scripter, a writer, you know, a penciler. Sometimes, like Marvel's had more than one penciler in an issue. Um, you know, because it's all just starts coming down to these deadlines, and um, but the other interesting thing is, do comics, for how many think about it, like for how many comics that are produced monthly. And I know they gauge like their salespeople and figure out, you know, what the perceived demand is, and then they try not to overprint, right? But man, there's just got to be like landfills of unsold comics, you know. I think some of them have ended up at Mile High Comics, at least some of them from the past, you know. Um, but think about it, with all the paper product of what comics are that these companies are printing, that, you know, whatever isn't sold ends up becoming excess, you know, paper product that has to be paid to store somewhere, right? You produced a thing, and so who's going to pay the storage fee? You know, at some point, the like housing all these unsold comics. So I really think that there is like a comic graveyard somewhere where unsold comics go to die. Unfortunately, you know. I'm just crazy enough that you know, being an indie guy, that I didn't I didn't have the heart to do that, even though I'm having these boxes, you know. Um, which again, like I was able to, in my life, like get rid of over to sell and distribute personally, because it's never, that's been the issue with Punctuation Men so far. It's just never had a good distribution deal. If I could just get a good distribution deal at some point in time, then, you know, I think it has a future. It could become more. But I'm still in the development of early issues phase right now, and you know, Issue 2's coming out soon, guys, so be on the lookout for that in a month or two. But yeah, it's kind of a sad thing to think about. Like, imagine like these like, because I used to have I've had dreams of like one time I had this crazy dream where I was like floating around in like a dimension. I don't know how else to describe it. Basically, I was like kind of like floating in and out, like kind of flying, but um not like Superman, but more just kind of floating and moving. And I was like, I came into this like huge, gigantic, enormous room, and it was just like, very surreal, but it was like this unending like comics, like racks and racks and racks and racks of comics. And to me that was that was pretty cool. But it's also a little bit daunting. Oh yeah, it's strange. I did have a dream like that. There's something cool about it. There's something kind of magical. If you try to not use your adult brain, just try to, use your. As I believe that I believe in a lot of like the things like Carl Jung talks about, like the persona that people have and the real you that is buried underneath it. And you know there is a sort of fact of the uh a sort of fact of things is that like the real you is who you were before society conditioned you. So one time I had to get a endoscopy, and I was placed under anesthesia. Well, when I came out of anesthesia, I was kind of like acting like a kid. But I was so happy. I was just so like, and it must have, it's just the wiring in my brain, is what it had to have been from the, um, obviously from the anesthesia. But at the same time, I felt like that. I feel like that's who I really like was, like on the inside. So sometimes people see me and they think maybe I'm a little bit distant or uh like whatever. I don't know what people think of me when they see me in public, but I'm not a real like talkative person. Like I'm nice to people, and I'll say hello, and like if I walk by somebody on the street, but it does depend on my mood. If I'm in a bad mood, maybe I won't, but um if I'm in a good mood, I will. And then in general, it's not that I'm mean to people, but I have like I think I have, like a lot of adults, a kind of like these, like this system of defenses kind of thing, you know, and it's almost subconscious, you know. You're not really 100% in control of it. But I am aware of it though, and that's better than just being completely oblivious to it. And just the same as like with Carl Jung's idea about becoming too identified with your persona, which is, the persona is like this little fake character of you. Like, imagine it like a little character of you, you know, maybe, and maybe it's got a mask, but maybe it's like a whole bodysuit of you, and you kind of, it's kind of like those old cartoons, they zip them up in the back, like, and imagine you put on this like character costume of yourself, and then you go to your job, you know, and then, you know, that's what the persona is. It's the character that we create in the world um to survive. You know, it's what we've learned is acceptable behaviors, and you know, but the problem that happens is that people become completely identified with that character suit, and then have later in life you can have these major identity problems because of that identification. So I guess Carl Jung doesn't say the suit is a totally unnecessary thing, or that you know, and then it's more about that, be aware of what the suit is, and then keep it in its place so that you don't become too identified with it, you know, and then move towards being as authentic as possibly you can, you know, because that's going to lead you to a more, because it leads to like a deep, profound dissatisfaction otherwise with your life and your, yeah, with your life. So um I'm gonna ink these eyes with a tech pen there. I'm gonna keep these chunky. I want them to be too small. Hey guys, drop a like if you've been enjoying the video, please. Thank you. Just remember, it's not what I say, but it's what I do that defines me. Remember that line in Batman? It was Chris Nolan directed Batman. I think it was the first one. The one with Ra's al Ghul. Ra's al Ghul. Kind of an interesting name. Creators, they a lot of times they really do try to find like interesting names to for characters and stuff. And sometimes they'll deliberate quite a lot till they land on something they're happy with. Because that's part of the creative process, is not just like follow the system, here's the format, do the system, done. Follow the system, here's the format, do the system, done. When you're trying to break the mold, it's a different approach, and the approach is more do something. How does it feel? How can you make that something that you did feel a little bit more magical? You know, what, okay, did I do this correctly? Maybe I could, it's like this endless, like, it could become endless tweaking to try to create something that feels correct to you, whether it's in the story, the art, or whatever it is. Now, you do have to balance that, because you could end up in this is, I'm just going to make all this black right here. You could end up just endlessly tweaking, right? Endlessly tweaking. And the problem with endlessly tweaking is that you end up getting nothing done. You know? You at some point you have to say, okay, this is really freaking close. It may not be 160%, but I'm not feeling that my tweaks are making a whole heck of a lot of difference anymore. I think it's done, That's the point where you do have to call it done. Because if you can't ever cross that finish line, then ultimately nothing ever does get done. See right here, I'm doing something. It's removing information, but I want to do that because I actually want to, in certain little areas, remove information to make the art more readable. But I still want it to be cool, but sometimes this is the stuff that takes the time, is like figuring out exactly where to remove the information, where to keep it. But you got to kind of switch into a design thinking, because you can for sure get to a problematic zone where you've created too much information that makes the image hard to read. And right now I feel that this image is sort of teetering on that line. But what I might do is, like, for instance, I might just like erase it, but I might do that actually off camera, because I don't know, I'm kind of feeling this stream has I don't know, I've said a lot of things. If you've been hanging in there with me, listening to me chat, I appreciate it. These aren't going to be videos that have some sort of mass appeal because of the niche, super niche nature of them. And I've already kind of accepted that because I can make other videos that are more, fast paced, stuff that are more for that purpose. But these are the long form content videos of people that, want to sort of deep dive into my world a little bit more and see more of my creative process. Hmm. Yeah, I'm almost thinking of a lot of this information, just getting rid of it there. Let's do that. Let's go ahead and just remove that information there. Whoa. Okay. Sorry if I had my bald head covering half of what I was just doing right there. At least you got to hear. So, let's see here. I'm going to do something crazy now. I'm going to attempt to make this whole piece pop more, introduce simplification and pure black zones rather than um, explaining everything, right? This is the magic. But the thing is that I could end up though with too much black, that's part of the problem, is like balancing the black of it. And if I mess it up, maybe I'll fix it with whiteout later and show you guys that. This right here is a kind of like a chunkier pigment, Pigma brush kind of thing. Or no, it's not. It's actually like this like cheap little marker I found at an Asian supply store, and I've refilled it with my own ink, and it works pretty good for like this kind of stuff, like chunking in areas, So what I'm intuitively feeling is that this area right here, maybe I need to actually lighten a bit. I'm squinting and thinking though. But this is the kind of stuff I do when I make my art, you know. It's like I'm almost kind of rethinking the image, you know, like from what I originally drew, and now I'm trying to be like, okay, how can I actually make this better? And some of it is literally about removing things, removing information, you know. Like, what if we did something crazy? Since we need to balance blacks more in the piece, maybe we rethink how the blacks are acting and turn this from a, you know, or like invert the job that the blacks are doing in the piece. Yeah. So, because what I'm trying to do is bring a balance to the piece. So, if the area down here is black heavy, then in a design sense, try to imagine what this might look like with black. And if I do add black to all this area up here, it'll create high contrast zones in that smoky area. But the problem is that a lot of the rest of this piece already has high contrast zones. Hmm. So I'm sort of what you guys may be thinking I've lost my mind at this point because you know, I'm jumping away from what the image was originally, you know, the original drawing. But I think the overall piece will actually be better for it because I'm zeroing in right now on actually the finished piece now. It's actually almost there. Um, I'm squinting. There's some areas I see I want to simplify the shapes in a more bold way. Even all this stuff is like, I'm just going to get rid of it. Here too, I'm going to cut this to black because it's what the crazy thing I'm doing is I'm redefining the overall balance of the piece. Like the piece had a particular balance before, but by doing what I'm doing, I'm redefining that balance. And at first it starts to look like it's throwing it off, but if I can like simplify and like land the plane, then it'll actually look better because I did that. So what I'm doing now is no longer merely just inking what's there. I'm redefining what's there. I wouldn't be surprised if it's something a lot of people do. But besides, I don't know. It's kind of there. Yeah, if you guys ever look at like the original Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Eastman and Laird, like it's not that really refined, as far as like the art. It's crude in like a beautiful way. But right now though, you can see already sort of what I've done. I introduced a lot more blacks down here, and then as we go up, the blacks become less up in the smoke up here. Now, what I'm deliberating on is if I want to introduce more blacks up here too. Let's go for it. This may make or break. Make or break. Because now what's going to kind of happen in a way is these will all become like high contrasty looking up here. But I'm thinking that there may be a way to save it. Maybe. Let's see here. I've just been letting this stream roll on, guys. Hopefully you're still with me. Let me check, just out of curiosity, how long the stream has been going. 103 minutes. That's kind of on the long side. So let's keep it going though. Let's keep it going. It's kind of like, did you ever see that Seinfeld episode where they're driving the they're driving the car and they're running out of gas, and they just keep going. They were gonna fill up, but then they're like, no man, let's just keep going. Then inevitably they do end up running out of gas. But it's pretty hilarious. I need to draw off a page here. Try to do this quickly. One thing that artists like Mike Mignola are really good at is design. So, yeah, he is totally design first above everything, you know. And he designs those blacks in a very specific way, you know, to have a very specific job that they're doing. Um, I think why I chose to do what I'm doing now is I don't know, just the mood of it. The mood of the piece needed to darken up a bit, you know. But I want to end this stream relatively soon, so I am going to block this in relatively quickly so that you can sort of get a feeling, and then any like final refinements and stuff I'm just going to do off stream. It's 103 minutes is already kind of a long one. Cool, right? Just in general, like you know, I don't know what your guys' opinions would be, but if you saw the what the image originally looked like, it was good, right? I mean, it wasn't bad. It wasn't a bad drawing, but what I've tried to introduce here is like a different kind of a piece of art, like using high contrast to create this kind of chaotic feeling. And I wasn't sure that what I'm doing up here was going to work, and then I went for it because I think it actually improved the piece quite a bit already. Just that, you know, everything else was just going to be like a little bit of simplification and a little bit of like just finessing it, right? One last thing I'm going to do before I end the stream, guys, and that's ink this little circle part of his eye. And then I'm going to wrap up the stream, and I'll see you next week. And next week, I will be drawing this guy, Brad the Lotion Salesman. So hopefully that one turns out cool. But this stream, I've been drawing Runon Sentaunce, the Evil Frenchman, from the Punctuation Men. Copies available now on eBay. And soon, the restored edition available anywhere books are sold. You just have to go ask them for it. Not yet, but soon. You just have to go say, hey, can you get a copy of Punctuation Men, the restored edition? And they can look it up in their computer and see it that, oh, Ingram Spark has it. And they can order it for you. But if you want to get more copies and you want to get the original copies, then these are available in bundles on eBay right now. So see, I'm blind, so I'm taking off my glasses. I'm going to come in and ink this little eye here. That's it. Done. That's not. All right, guys. Like I said, a little bit more refinement off stream, but it's the the nexus or whatever the nexus of the piece is there. Go check out Steve Rude. He streams on the same days that I do, and he's an amazing artist. Just amazing. Steve Rude. Check out his live streams. All right. That's it, guys. Join me next Saturday. I'm going to end the stream here. That's been the inking session for this Runon Sentaunce piece. Peace out, guys.